you for coming on our webinar today. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Liz Chiva. I'm the director at Hallidays HR. And this is Lizzi Walsh. She's our HR business partner at Hallidays HR as well. So just for the next kind of 45 minutes, we obviously want to take you through all the complexities around contracts of employment, how we can keep you out of trouble, and looking at, what are, the minimum legal requirements, the risks of not having these documents in place, and then obviously the benefits of having these as kind of a foundation, and really making sure that, you're legally compliant, but also from a best practice point of view, what that might look like as well. Okay, like I said, we hope to see your faces, but we haven't got the cameras on, but we haven't got the microphones on either. So the chat functions should be activated. So hopefully we'll be able to receive any questions that you've got. Oh, I can see Matthew Jones's face. We've got one face. We've got one face.
Maybe you all need to turn your cameras on, perhaps, if you want to, of course.
Unless you're in your pajamas, and then you might not want to, but we understand. We understand. So yeah, so hopefully it'll be kind of, 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have. Okie doke. Okay, so before we get started then, we just wanted to do a bit of a poll really, to kind of gauge where you are currently in terms of having contracts of employment, whether you've got any policies or an employee handbook, and how confident you feel that these are kind of fit for purpose, up to date. So I think what we've got is a QR code. This is getting very technical now. So we've got a QR code on the screen. So if you're not on your phone, if you're able to scan the QR code for us, please, and just answer the questions as they come up. And then like magic, all of the answers will pop up on our screen.
If the QR code doesn't, what have I done? If the QR code doesn't work, there's a link there that you can also copy. It takes you direct to the 3 questions. Oh, it's working. Woohoo!
You've all got contracts of employment. We will go home now. Any more responses? Give it a minute. Maybe not a minute because I'm a bit impatient. Maybe 30 seconds.
This will be because they've got a policy that says you can't have your mobile phone on when you're in the workplace. So
or you're on your mobile phone, which makes it quite impossible. All right, let's go with those 4 responses. Thank you very much for doing that. So how many of you have contracts of employment in place at the moment? So 100% of you said yes, which is brilliant. What is next? So how many of you have an employee handbook? So 75% said yes and 25% said no. It's brilliant. And the last one. So how many of you have these documents but are not sure whether they are up to date and legally compliant? So yes, you do, but you're not sure. And obviously there's a high proportion that you're not sure whether they are up to date and legally compliant or not. Okay, brilliant. So hopefully as we go through kind of the next half an hour or so, like I say, we'll give you some insight in terms of what are the bare minimum, the basics of what you need to have, and what you could put in place going forward. Okay, so in terms, just looking at, if we just move on to the next slide, please, Lizzi, my glamorous assistant.
I'm trying. Don't know how I get out of it.
Have you broken it now?
Yeah. Oh, wait. Hey.
There we go. You were all just going home at that point in time. Okay, so what are the basics then? So a business must have, for all workers and employees, a document stating what the main conditions of employment are when they start work. So this is what's known as a written statement of particulars, okay? And a written statement is made up of two things. So first of all, it's the main document, which is what's known as the principal statement. And then there is the what's called a wider written document. Okay, so kind of both documents set the minimum criteria for what you need to have in place for any kind of employee or worker with you. And you know, these can simply be given to an employee or a worker. They don't need to be signed. So I guess that's one kind of difference with a contract of employment. And you can just give them this statement, if you like, and this wider written document to them. So the principal statement, so that is a day one right, whereas the wider written document, that needs to be provided within 2 months of their start date. Okay, so if we just have a look at what kind of you need to include in each of these things. So within the principal statement then, so you need to include the employer's name, so the company name, the employee or the worker's name, their job title or some kind of description of the work that they're going to be doing, and what the start date is. Okay. You also need to detail how much and how often that they're going to get paid. You need to specify the hours of work and the days of work, and if and how that might vary. So, for example, if they're going to need to work at the weekends or any kind of night work or overtime, all that needs to be detailed in the statement. Any holiday entitlement, and whether that includes kind of the bank holidays, the place of work, so looking at where they're going to be working and whether there is an option or a requirement to have some kind of relocation. If they work in different places, then where this will be and what the employer's address will be at that place. How long a job is expected to last. And obviously, if it's on a fixed term contract basis, then what's the end date for that contract, if there is one. How long any probationary period is and what the conditions of that probationary period are. Any other benefits. So we've put there kind of childcare vouchers, lunch, but obviously it could be anything. And then whether there's any kind of obligatory training that you need them to carry out. So it might be manual handling or something like that. So all of that needs to be detailed in there. And for any employees, so not for workers, just for employees, it must also include the date of any previous job that they've held. So if you're going to class it towards that continuous employment, that service kind of requirement, that continuous employment, so you need to kind of include that as well. In addition to that, if an employee or a worker has to work outside of the UK for more than 1 month, then the principal statement must also include how long they'll be abroad, what currency they'll be paid in, whether they'll receive any additional pay or benefits, and then whether there's any terms related to their relocation to the UK. Okay. Another information that employer must give on day one is anything around sick pay and procedures, and any other paid leave. So, for example, maternity, paternity, things like that, and also the notice periods. So, and obviously you can choose whether to include this additional information in your principal statement at the very beginning. So I guess on top of the things that we're showing you there on the screen, or if you wanted to, you can put that in a separate document if it's relevant as a supplement to the principal statement. Okay. All I will say is obviously if you do provide it separately, it just needs to be accessible for the worker. or the employee. So if you've got an intranet or something like that that they've got access to, then that generally is pretty good. They just obviously, it can't be hidden away or something where they don't have access to it. Okay, let's have a look at the written statement then. So as I said, this is the one that you need to provide as a bare minimum in addition to the principal statement, but this is within 2 months rather than as a day one right. Okay, so this is talking about, if you've got any pension provisions and any pension schemes, then this needs to be included. Any collective agreements that you're aware of, and any other right to kind of non-compulsory training that you might be providing to that particular employee or worker. But you also need to provide, and I think this is probably the most common one for a lot of employers, is the bare minimum of the disciplinary and the grievance procedures. So having these policies in place, obviously in addition to your principal statement, is vital. Okay, so I guess with that in mind, oh, we've got a dodgy image on here. Just pretend you can read all of that. But just, you might kind of be thinking, well, how does that differ from a contract of employment? Do we even need a contract of employment if I can just kind of issue a principal statement and a wider written document? Then what is the point in having an employment contract? So basically what it is that it is an extension of that statement of particulars. Okay, and the main difference is that obviously it is signed by both parties. So it has that whole, from it makes it legally binding. It makes it kind of more robust in terms of defending your position from a legal point of view. But also it's that you're able to include different clauses, different terms, which in addition to the basics will be able to protect your business. So it's that enhanced protection. So it'll be around, potentially around confidentiality, around data protection, maybe. It might be restricted covenants in terms of, who they can work for afterwards, and protection of kind of your intellectual property and all of that kind of stuff. This is what kind of makes it really, like I say, robust in terms of from a legal perspective. And also, makes it so that it's very clear of the obligations from the employee and the worker and the employer of kind of who's responsible for what. Okay. So in terms of, I guess, the types of different contracts then, so there are loads, in all honesty. I've obviously on the screen there, you can see that there's quite a few different ones. And it is really important to make sure that you've got the right people on the right contract. And that because there's different clauses for each of the different kind of types of workers and employees, to make sure that you are protected in the right way, and that obviously you're meeting your legal obligations under each of those kind of statuses, if you like. So, you've got apprentice, you've got your casual worker, you've got your director service agreements, which these are the, sometimes these get missed quite a lot, but are, very important. The fixed term contract, the non-exec director, self-employed consultancy agreements, your permanent ones. So that's kind of your standard, if you like, permanent contracts that you'll see most of. Then you've got term time only, varied hours, work experience, 0 hours. So, quite a lot there really to make sure that you've got the right ones. Okay.
So why bother then with a contract of employment and all those different types, I guess? So a lot of businesses and owners can and managers, I guess, kind of from a day-to-day basis, can sometimes get quite wrapped up with the day-to-day operations of the business, and quite rightly so, of course, managing your team, etc. that sometimes things like employment contracts can get sidetracked and forgotten about. And I think probably more so with the change of employment contracts becoming a day one right, whereas we used to have, you know, the 8 weeks prior. Obviously that puts a little bit more pressure in terms of being able to get those documents out. Of course, employment law changes every April and October, so it doesn't take long for those documents to ultimately become out of date. And in terms of kind of ourselves, we actually started working with a new client who was a busy, very typically, as I've just said, a busy CEO, wasn't aware of the recent employment law changes, and there were quite a few in April, and there are more obviously upcoming. So she just didn't have the time to kind of bring those documents up to date herself. So she got in touch and, you know, ultimately through our conversations, recognised the value of the expertise that we could offer and the need to kind of quickly update the contracts that she had for her employees to ensure that they were legally compliant. So kind of through that process, they've now got new documents that we update for them, you know, every April, every October. So that kind of gives her peace of mind that ultimately, you know, her documents are legally compliant and she's not going to kind of get into trouble, as this picture would suggest. It also means that the team are kind of fully on board with policies and procedures. We also did that piece of work for them, so, you know, so they know what's expected of them, you know. So for all employers, obviously, a legally sound, comprehensive employment contract is essential, but of course not just to save you from ending up in jail. So in terms of policies then, as well as the basics, so there are actually 3 employment policies required by UK law that class as the basics that any business must provide to their employees. So first up is a health and safety policy. So this is actually compulsory for businesses employing 5 or more people. So potentially some businesses, you know, you may not actually need to have one, but yeah, for 5 employees or more. So this policy in particular should state the business's commitment to ensuring that employees, visitors, those essentially that are, you know, on site in the offices, etc., are kind of safe and in a healthy working environment. It should, of course, outline the responsibilities of those involved in kind of, you know, perhaps if you've got a health and safety representative, or if something happens in the workplace, who it is that you report to, what that reporting procedure looks like, etc., and how you essentially control any risks. So whilst this isn't actually a policy that we at Hallidays HR can assist you with, we can put you in contact with somebody that can, if that's a policy that you identify that you need. However, the others we certainly can. So a business's disciplinary and dismissal policy then should comply with the ACAS Code of Practice on disciplinary and grievance procedures. So it should explain the standards of conduct and performance expected from employees and the procedures for dealing with misconduct or poor performance as a bare minimum, as well as the grievance, which again complies with the ACAS Code of Practice on disciplinary and grievance procedures. A grievance policy should give a clear process for employees to follow, so that when they wish to make, raise a concern or make a complaint, the policy clearly outlines what it is they need to do, who it is they need to go to. You know, if they want to complain about somebody within the working environment, the treatment by somebody, their working conditions, the grievance policy should enable them to be able to do so. Okay, so the employee handbook then. So we just spoke about, obviously, as a minimum requirement, it is to have those 3. However, that of course doesn't cover every eventuality that you may face during the employment life cycle. So it's important to be prepared in advance of these scenarios. And we believe that, you know, creating an employee handbook gives employers an opportunity to set the foundations, so to identify and share what your culture is, and to describe exactly how you're going to deal with all employment scenarios. So it's important to point out here, that if you do have an employee handbook which sets out precise details of any matters contained in the contract of employment, such as holidays, sick leave, etc., then you can simply refer the employee or the worker to the relevant policy rather than having to include all of that detail within the Section 1 statement or the contract of employment. So this kind of, you know, in terms of the role of the employee handbook, in our eyes, it's the fundamental building block for any business. So it is a foundation based on the company values. Okay, so it's a, you know, it's a, at best, it's a set of standards, obligations and commitments for all employees to live by. So it gives businesses the opportunity to confirm their stance on all eventualities within the employment life cycle. So it essentially creates a Bible for managers and a reference document for employees. And it also gives employees the reassurance that, you know, you as their employer will handle every situation with consistency and transparency because it's there in black and white. This is our commitment. This is how we are going to deal with this specific issue. And policies and procedures in the workplace are obviously an essential component of people management for any business. So having workplace policies and procedures is essential for a number of reasons. So as mentioned, obviously, you know, these documents help to establish clear guidelines and expectations for employees. It ensures consistency in behaviours and decision making across your business. So by outlining rules and standards, policies and procedures can ultimately help prevent misunderstandings, conflict, and hopefully any legal issues within the workplace. They can also promote a safe and inclusive environment by addressing important topics such as harassment, discrimination, what safety protocols are in place, and any ethical standards that you stand by. And they also help to protect the rights of both you as the employer and your employees, because they provide a framework, as we've discussed with those essential policies, for addressing grievances, for managing disciplinary and other workplace issues. And ultimately, having well-defined policies and procedures can enhance, you know, organizational efficiency and productivity. So by having those streamlined processes, having them documented and outlining kind of what's expected, what that best practice looks like, these documents can help employees understand their roles and responsibilities, which is ultimately what you want. It's going to lead to that improved performance and overall effectiveness in the workplace. And furthermore, workplace policies and procedures help to mitigate risks and ensure compliance with legal requirements and industry standards. So by establishing those clear guidelines, businesses can minimise potential conflicts, protect employees and other stakeholders, and ultimately uphold their reputation and credibility. And Liz mentioned earlier about in terms of, you know, the information from either the statements or the contract and making sure that those are accessible. The same goes for the employee handbook. So what some businesses opt to do is provide new starters with their own, you know, a hard copy of the employee handbook, or, you know, kind of in a bit of a more digital world, if you like. We're seeing that businesses are saving them on, you know, HR systems or an intranet site, so that a copy is made available to the employee, and you are just simply signposting them there to ensure that they're reading it. Okay, so in terms of some workplace policy examples, there's quite a few, as you can see from that slide. I don't anticipate reading them all out. I will leave you to that, and obviously you'll get a copy of the slides after this. And workplace policies can vary widely between employers. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. The nature and extent of your policies and procedures should indeed be tailored to reflect the needs of your company. So smaller businesses may decide that, you know, they actually only need a limited number of key policies and procedure. But at the end of the day, you know, I think, you know, all businesses want to grow. So, you know, if the business grows, the environment, you know, in which it operates alters, the requirement for policies may change. So some of these over time may become more apparent that, you know, there is a need for them. And I think, you know, just bear in mind when you are developing such policies, you just need to ensure that you provide an overview of the policy. So kind of what's its purpose, describe how it operates, you know, in practice, and then include a section that kind of details how the policy interacts, if at all it does, with any other policies and procedures. So some policies, you know, whistleblowing, harassment, bullying, grievance, etc., can sometimes go hand in hand. So it's important to reference other policies where there is where there's synergy there. Because if not, unfortunately, there are quite a few risks if you get it wrong. And these fancy bubbles don't just apply to not having policies or not having an employee handbook. They also apply to either not having a contract of employment or indeed an up-to-date contract of employment. So I think, you know, potentially worst case, you know, is that you find yourself at an employment tribunal. Nobody wants to end up there. Never mind think about all the kind of the time and the cost spent leading up to it. You know, the kind of time frames for a tribunal to go ahead at the moment, you know, from the point that somebody puts a claim in, it's around 15 months. So that's a pretty stressful 15 months that you are kind of, you know, anticipating that employment tribunal. So a kind of, you know, a failure to adhere to the timescales or include the information that we've discussed can ultimately end you in an employment tribunal. With that, of course, you know, there are legal costs, there's potentially your legal costs, the solicitor fees, you know, of the individual that put the claim in against you, especially if they are successful. We've then got grievances, you know, so if an employee is unclear on policies or procedures, that can lead to them feeling disgruntled. They could potentially want to put as a grievance in, submit a grievance. And that, again, it takes up your time. There could well be a risk of constructive dismissal if service allows for that. And ultimately, you know, if grievances aren't dealt with correctly, you know, you may find that you are paying upwards of, you know, 100, well, not upwards, but a maximum of £115,000 or at least a year's salary for that individual. So yeah, pretty hefty cost in all fairness. We've then obviously got poor performance. So if somebody is performing badly, or, you know, from a conduct behaviour, you know, they're misbehaving, and other employees are kind of seeing that, they have this perception that people are getting away with it, then issues can continue, and ultimately that behaviour can, you know, it can become condoned, which then makes it very hard to manage in the future, because if somebody has been allowed to get away with something for, you know, quite a period of time, to then turn around and say, oh, well, actually, you know, you're not doing that correctly, or you should be doing this and not this, it doesn't really add much kind of, you know, strength to that. And, you know, we have to think about the morale of the employees who feel that these employees are getting away with things. You know, that's where there's a link potentially between those individuals submitting a grievance because they ultimately feel that they're being treated differently. We then have, it's quite a long list, I did say, not to scare you. But, you know, we then have, you know, a risk of a discrimination claim. And this is actually a day one right. So, you know, from the day that somebody starts with you, if they have a protected characteristic, then they could make a claim for discrimination if they believe they have indeed been discriminated against. And the award that a tribunal would give is uncapped. And there is also things that called injury to feelings and, of course, loss of earnings. So if you imagine that 15 months that somebody's not been employed and they get an award for loss of earnings, you're finding yourself, as well as all of these other figures that we've spoken about, paying 15 months of salary, 15 months of pension, 15 months of holidays, plus any other benefits that they're entitled to. It's soon going to rack up. And last but not least is obviously your reputational damage. Nobody likes a bad review, you know, and places like Glassdoor can be quite damaging for your business. So that could, of course, have an impact on recruiting good quality candidates. You know, the best employees tend to really do their research when they're looking for a new role. They will go on places like Glassdoor, Google, etc. You know, some people may even be known to kind of do a search to see if you have been through an employment tribunal, and ultimately, you know, that can deter them from applying. So yeah, not to scare you, but in capital letters, there are quite a few risks to getting these things wrong. Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously in terms of Lizzie said that there is a legal obligation, like we've said, to have the bare minimum in terms of the principal statement and the written, I can't remember what it's called now, the other written thing.
Yeah.
Yes. But what we kind of advocate is that as a bare minimum, if you don't have anything in place at all, is that do go for a contract of employment over the principal statement, just because you'll be able to, as we say, it's signed. You'll be able to tie in all different types of clauses so that you are protected and obviously under the right type of contract for the worker or employee that you're dealing with. And then to have at least those two policies that we deal with anyway. Obviously, the health and safety policy is a bit separate. But whenever we're talking to kind of to clients about this, we say, look, that this is what we would advocate, is that you have a contract of employment with a disciplinary and a grievance policy attached as a bare minimum. So, that's, if you don't have anything in place at the minute, look at what you do have. If anything, because there might be little bits here and there, emails, whatever. That is a bare minimum. Obviously, the handbook side of things is, that is definitely best practice. And like Lizzie kind of said, like, it really does set that foundation for when you're going to grow. And if you can kind of set your stall out before when you're working with maybe 5-10 employees, that type of thing, or even a couple of employees, it's a really good opportunity to be able to sit back and to think, right, what is our business all about? What are our values? What do we want to, give for maternity, paternity? What is our holiday entitlement going to be? How are we going to pay these things? What is your stance on things? And just get it nailed really from the very start, so that everybody is on the same page. You can almost just have peace of mind that it's gonna run, and then you can get on with kind of doing what you do best really, and kind of running your business. For those of you that do have contracts and a handbook maybe, or policies in place, but I think when we did the poll at the beginning, maybe you're not quite sure whether they're up to date or not. So like Lizzie mentioned, employment law does change every April and October. So these documents do get out of date very quickly. So, what we can do, is, or we don't even have to do it, you can do it. But, it's really important to kind of take stock that if you do have those documents, that you are looking at them, you're reviewing them, you're kind of making sure that you're almost doing a gap analysis in terms of, are these fit for purpose, identifying what the gaps are and how you're going to bridge those gaps. And like I say, this is something that we do for clients, and we can do it on a one-off basis for non-clients, or it's part of the service that we do offer to our clients as kind of our first piece of work when we're working with somebody. And like I say, is really kind of is really good to make sure that they're up to date. And then if you do become a client, or you are currently a client, we make sure that we're updating your documents for you every April and October, so that we simply just send out the updated documents, all of the contract templates that you might need, so that as and when you need something, that it's just sitting there and you can use it, and it gives you that whole peace of mind that they're absolutely up to date. And you don't even have to think about it really. It's that whole Bible and reference document for you, your managers, and your team members. So I guess in terms of, as I mentioned, I think, we do help with all of this, as you would probably expect. It is like it's our bread and butter, I guess, of what we do. But there are other people out there. I guess the most important thing is just, to make sure that you're covered, to make sure you're legally compliant, that you're not going to end up in any courts, or, worst case scenario, I don't want to say jail, it's a bit extreme, but that you kind of get the message in terms of how important these things are as a basis. So I guess in terms of kind of how we work and what our kind of vision is. So we're very much about our whole ethos is around, you know, we want to make businesses like the best places that they can be to work. So we're very much about kind of working in partnership with our clients, either, like I say, on a one-off basis or on a longer term basis, but kind of looking at, you know, the culture side of things, you know, making sure that, you know, that we're trying to help create an environment where all of the team members are motivated, they're engaged, because if you get that right, then actually it ends up being much more profitable. There's much less headaches, and you know, we can really kind of a bit of a win-win situation. And you know, this side of it, in terms of, you know, the fundamental compliance side is vital for that, as well as the additional kind of you know, the processes that sit behind it. It's about looking at, you know, the training of your managers as well. So we do offer training, like line manager training. We do you know, sessions on that every 6 weeks, to really kind of empower your managers so that they are able to have, you know, them able to create that culture. That's what it's all about, in terms of, you know, being able to run with those people policies that are in your handbook, be able to have difficult conversations effectively, so you're not kind of doing everything. So we do that. We also do bespoke training for whatever, you know, you might need. And you know, also we do recruitment as well, so we kind of do the end-to-end kind of the whole employment life cycle, if you like, in terms of how we could potentially help you. So just, I guess, a little bit before we finish up of, you know, if you're not already with us, why potentially you should choose us, other than you know, we like to work in partnership with our clients. We like that whole personal approach. We like to know our clients. We like to understand your business. We like to know what you're all about, what you're trying to achieve. And obviously, you know, I think it goes without saying, in terms of, you know, we're qualified. We know this stuff inside and out. We're able to help you and guide you to kind of think, right, look, what in your sector, in your business area, what kind of clauses do you need in your contracts? What kind of policies do you need? What are those things that are kind of really specific to you? And we'll work with you to do that. So obviously we kind of, you know, we ensure that compliance, we take away that burden. And, you know, overall, it's kind of, it's taking that away from you so that you can, you know, leaves you to do what, you know, you're good at, and that whole value add piece. So yeah, so like I say, we can do a number of different things, either on a one-off basis or on a more kind of recurring monthly basis, if you're interested in a longer kind of relationship with us. No, a few more blowing our own trumpets, actually. So so just wanted to put this up there, actually, because this is you know, I guess it's all well and good me telling you how amazing we are, but in terms of, you know, we actually ask our clients on a regular basis in terms of how they think we're doing. And this is the results that we got just a few months ago. So we're really proud of this, you know, and think that we can really add value to the businesses that we work at. Okay, so just finally then, has anybody got any questions? Appreciate that potentially is a lot to take in. If you want to pop them in the chat. Are you all just shocked?
Ready for lunch. Thank you,
No problem.
Tracy.
Yeah, thank you.
We will send the recording of the webinar out. It'll go on our LinkedIn. You'll get a copy of the slides. So obviously you'll have our details in there if there is anything that you want to ask us. Yep,
Definitely. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll leave you to the rest of your day. Right, thank you very much. Bye.